Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again with Nick Gallo for another episode. Today, we're going to take up lesson number 5, data analytics. Nick, 2, maybe 3 years ago, data analytics was seen as cutting edge. And for a lawyer like me, it was sort of, wow, who can I get to tell me what all this means? We had 2 enforcement actions, the SAP action and the Albemarle action, where they specifically discussed data analytics. It turns out there was a big part of the ABB remediation was data analytics, although it is not as called out in the DPA or the settlement documents. But data analytics is here. It's here to stay. I think it's now sort of a best practice. And in 2 years, it may be table stakes. I wanted to maybe explore how the DOJ called this out and what we saw and what we've heard from the companies so far about their data analytics program. But before we get to there, once again, are these discussions you're having with clients and potential clients, are some people who haven't put such a program together in place? Are they sort of putting their toe in the water? How's that working?
Yeah, it's a conversation we're having a lot. I mean, it's out in the zeitgeist. It's in everybody's mind because of these cases and because it's becoming increasingly important. I just think a lot of people don't know where to start and they get a little bit overwhelmed with the data analytics mountain to climb. And I mean, I don't know, let's break down what this is. I mean, we do data analytics in our personal life all the time. You look at your bills every month, you look at what's spending on the credit card. I mean, we're looking at data and we're getting information from data constantly, and that information drives a different behavior. That's what data analytics is supposed to do. Yeah, it's going to be table stakes. I don't know how you can run a household without managing your household budget. I don't know how you can run a program or run a business without considering numbers. These numbers are indications of things happening, right? And yeah, I think it's something that can be very overwhelming, and that's the general sense that I hear from the conversations that we have with clients and others. Where do I start? Do I need a data scientist on my team? I've heard that so many times over the last year. I don't know if you need an actual data scientist, but I don't know. It's definitely top of mind, and guys are kind of trying to figure it out, I think.
I love that because you're absolutely right. I learned data analytics when I was 16, when I was taught how to balance a checkbook.
Right.
And it's a little more sophisticated now, but maybe not much. It's more data and the ability to look at things quicker. For me, or let me go to Andrew McBride, who's the recently retired Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer from Albemarle, and he said there were 4 key purposes for using data and data analytics. Number 1 was risk identification issues. Number 2 was risk response. Number 3 was compliance program testing. And then number 4 was reporting. I think each one of those really shows the power of data analytics, but that it's asking the data analytics is looking at patterns of raked leaves that you and I may not be able to discern the pattern in raked leaves, but data analytics can, and they can if they're simply either told to or are trained through machine learning to find anomalies. Within those 4 categories, maybe what are your thoughts on how you could use risk identification, risk response, compliance program testing, and then reporting?
Look, maybe there's going to be AI-driven data analytics in 5 years that's going to find all of those connections. Until that's a reality, I think you just have to kind of see where you're at and see where you can improve a little bit. So until you have AI, machine learning in the background that's calling out anomalies in your data automatically for you, you have to kind of solve for what you have in your current circumstance. Let's just go to the first one, like risk identification issues. Again, how do we know what to respond to? How do we know what to work on? And how do we have a high confidence that the work we're doing is not just checking boxes, just kind of pushing papers around? To the extent that there's variability in our work, or to the extent that there's some creative decision-making in terms of like where we allocate our effort and focus, then there should be some desire to make sure that like we individually or as a team are focused on the things that are most important for our mandate or for our company's mission. So like having something that's going to tell us, hey, there's a risk factor here, or there's an indication, or there's an identification of a risk issue that is out of line with what we would expect, then that's something that's going to help direct our efforts. And again, if you talk to Andrew McBride, his data analytics thing was not the output of the system. It didn't seem to me that his concern was like, I got to put a data analytics thing together because the DOJ is going to really care about it. And I need to be able to show them that I'm using data to drive my decisions. I don't think it was that way. I think it was the other way. I think he was like, how do I solve this thing? How do we fix this problem? And how can I get some indications that like these efforts are working or they're not working? And I think that kind of natural thought about what do I have in place? What data do I have available? What can I work? What do I have available now that I can work with? And really just trying to drive toward a self-satisfaction of effectiveness opens up, I think it can remove some of the writer's block that I think a lot of us have with respect to data analytics, because we're talking about machine learning and we're talking about Power BI and we're talking about all these other dashboards that are bringing these things together. That is an ideal state for sure to work toward. Most of the people I talk to don't have something that's that extensive. And so I'm just saying, if you can flip it on its head and say data analytics is more of a means to an end, the end being my confidence in the effectiveness of my program, or my confidence that the effectiveness of my program is increasing, I think that reframe is a little freeing.
And I really like the way you described it as it's not the end result, it's the starting point. And it's the starting point because it's going to identify anomalies. How do you know it's an anomaly? Because you said, I want to see everything below A and above Z. I want to see spend that's outside the norm.
Right.
And data analytics can tell me what the norm is. I want to see spend that's 99 when the limit's 75. I want to see every one of those split receipts, whatever it may be.
Right.
And that it gives you a starting point from where you can then take a deeper dive using the human element. I had a guy tell me his company calls it the human loop. You put the human loop in and let them do the human loop thing. And I have seen and heard of programs that through machine learning became more sophisticated, and
for sure
it can work, but you don't have to start with that. You just have to be able to dump all of your marketing spend, to dump all your GTE spend, to dump all your commission spend literally on a worldwide basis into some sort of data analytics to get an average and then get things that are outside that average, whatever that might be. SAP, in their enforcement action, the way the DOJ described it was, I was wrong. They're in 150 countries. If you're in 150 countries, that may mean 150 ERP systems. You at least, if it's the best, you're going to have them all roll up into one, but you're still going to have individual reporting in those countries.
Right.
And so you have to have a way to break it down and look at the spend in each one of those countries. So that's how SAP used data analytics. But you also touched on a couple of other things, Nick, that I think are critical for the importance of data analytics at this part of your investigative and enforcement journey. That's program testing. Right. And the reason that's so critical is what the Department of Justice says: to avoid a monitor, you basically have to do two things. One, put a program in place, and two, test it. It's not simply to put a program in place. You have to test it and show the results of that testing to the Department of Justice. And that's where the data analytics is absolutely critical. I've been under a monitor. Nobody wants to be under a monitor. You don't want to be under a monitor. It's a costly, expensive exercise. So if you can put the investment in, it's going to make your business run better, but it's also going to give you this other benefit, and you're going to get a bigger discount from the Department of Justice. So the compliance program testing component, and finally the reporting. I mean, you talked about the reporting you and Geo have to do for your board. Now multiply that times 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 of a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company. How are you going to demonstrate to a board we're on top of this? A board doesn't want to see all of the reports. They may want to see a dashboard. They may want to hear the story, but they may ask you, you've told me this story, Nick. What's the numbers behind the story? And then you have to be able to give that detail if someone asks for it. I just see the framework that Andrew laid out as a great way to think about the categories and you're also right to say, as we get more sophisticated through machine learning or more adaptive AI, perhaps we can move to a different level or a different step. But right now, it's just this identification and testing in a documented format, and that's the reporting. So I hope that's a message that really resonates with compliance professionals at this point.
I hope it does too. And I think what I would add to it is do this for yourself. If you're worried about the effectiveness thing, like I've just had several conversations about what does this effectiveness mean from the DOJ? I don't know. What does effectiveness mean to you? Assuming that you're not an idiot, assuming that you know what you're doing, you are going to be able to get, I mean, this is really what the game is. How can I get them comfortable? How can I get the board comfortable with this investment I'm asking for? How can I get the DOJ comfortable with the changes I've made or the remediation I did? And I think part of it's storytelling, as you said, but part of it is also just if I am trying to solve for effectiveness myself, irrespective of how I'm going to be judged out there, I'm going to be able to be a lot more transparent, a lot more open, and a lot more sort of forthcoming with the assumptions I've made, the data I've utilized to arrive at the conclusions that have driven my responses, my actions, and whatever. I think getting caught up in, or not getting caught up in what data is the DOJ going to want to see, that's a rabbit hole. I would say focus on what data do you need to sleep well at night that you're making effective improvements in your program. And that's the data to present to those guys. Because they're just trying to get comfortable. They're trying to get comfortable with your approach. That's it.
That's a great point, because at the end of the day, what the DOJ wants to see is the remediation in your program.
Yes.
And you don't have to be cutting edge. You can bring now best practices strategy to that, but you have to be able to show them. And I can still remember I heard both sides of a conversation by a chief compliance officer who was in front of Wei Chen, who was the first compliance resource for the Department of Justice. And he was presenting his program, and she said, I want to see the data. I want to see the data. I want to see the data. And I say that because I talked to both of them independently, and they both gave the same story. And he was an internal audit type, so he had the data.
Mm-hmm.
So it was music to his ears, because that's what he wanted to talk about was the data. Really, that was the starting point. And to your point, that's what the DOJ wants to see. You've told me you put these steps in place. Show me you told me it's effective. Now show me with the data. And that can be the power of data analytics, but it can be much more. But if you just start with the 4 points that Andrew McBride gave us, I think it's a great starting point, and you can build from there.
Yeah. Start small and just get moving. Start small, little steps. It's a great framework. It really is.